With the 4K boost lens, the Insta360 ONE RS has received a module that should make it a real challenger to the GoPro Hero 10 as an action camera. And we can see right here in the first comparison that Insta360's new camera stabilizes the image similarly well as the GoPro. Could it be that this modular camera can keep up with or even outperform the Hero 10 when it comes to action shots? Let's find out today. The big strength of the Insta360 ONE RS is its modular design. It has a 360 module for 360 shots, a module with a very large 1-inch sensor, and as I said, the new 4K boost lens for use as a typical action camera. I'll briefly show you the special features of the first two modules later in this video. But today, we mainly want to find out how well the ONE RS performs as an action camera compared to the GoPro Hero 10. When it comes to an action camera, I'm a big fan of an extremely wide field of view. This is a comparison between the standard field of view wide of the GoPro and the standard field of view ultra wide of the Insta360 ONE RS. Apart from the very different colors, it is noticeable that the field of view is very similar, if not identical. Interestingly, the ONE RS also has a field of view called wide. However, this has a crop and cannot be compared to the wide field of view of the GoPro. Both cameras also have a field of view called linear, which has reduced distortion. In the case of linear, the field of view of the ONE RS is slightly wider than that of the Hero 10. Here you can see how big the difference is. On the other hand, it's exactly the opposite with super view, which is the widest field of view on the GoPro, but also the one with the most distortion. With action view, the ONE RS has a similar field of view, but it's not as wide as super view. Alright, let's take a look at the colors. We have already seen that the colors of the two cameras look very different. These shots were taken on the GoPro with the color profile natural, the shot of the ONE RS with the color profile standard. It is clearly noticeable that the ONE RS goes more in the direction of magenta. In addition, the GoPro image has much more contrast and clarity, as you can see here in the textures of the clouds. This shot of the GoPro was taken with vibrant, the color profile with the typical GoPro colors. It has a bit more saturation than natural. And this shot of the ONE RS was taken with vivid, the corresponding color profile of the Insta360. Of course, it's also a matter of taste, which you like better here. Let's take a look at a few other comparison shots. What simply makes a clear difference here is that the GoPro's shot has significantly more contrast. The ONE RS shot looks much softer in comparison. This is particularly noticeable in this shot. What is also noticeable, as you can also see in these shots with motion, is that the ONE RS shot is a bit brighter. The highlights are therefore not protected as well and burn out a bit faster. You can see that very well here on the left with the wall. The shot of the GoPro still contains all the details, while in the shot of the ONE RS the details are lost. We'll take a closer look at the dynamic range later. It's also interesting to note that GoPro recommends natural as the default color profile, while Insta360 prefers the saturated vivid color profile. Here you can see another comparison between natural on the GoPro and vivid on the ONE RS. So a comparison between the default settings on both cameras. The most important of all colors is the color of the skin tones. And with the skin tones of the Hero 10, the very high contrast look just stands out negatively. All the imperfections and details of the skin are strongly emphasized. The ONE RS produces much softer skin tones. However, the magenta tint can be noticed strongly here as well. The skin tones are a bit too reddish and look a bit unnatural. The ONE RS has an incredibly high resolution sensor with 48 megapixels. In video mode the maximum resolution is 4K. Only the special widescreen mode allows you to shoot in 6K. The Hero 10 on the other hand has a sensor with 23 megapixels, but allows you to shoot at up to 5.3K. The 4K image of the Insta360 is created by downsampling from a 48 megapixel sensor. Let's take a look at whether the GoPro's 5K image actually has more details. At first glance, both shots look similarly sharp and detailed. When we zoom in, this impression is confirmed. The GoPro shot has a bit more digital sharpness, but not necessarily more detail. Even at 400%, we cannot see a decisive difference between the two shots. Shooting with very bright and very dark areas in the same image is a big challenge for both cameras. Details are often lost in the bright areas. These details cannot be recovered even in post. You can see the problem very well in these shots. There are very dark areas in the bushes and very bright areas in the sky. And as you can see here in the comparison, the GoPro protects the bright areas much better. Less detail is lost. However, the One RS shot is a bit brighter overall, therefore a bit more details are captured in the dark areas. You can see that well here in the trees. In general, I have to say that the shot of the One RS produces significantly less image noise in the dark areas. I don't know if you can see this on YouTube, but the Hero 10 shot has a relatively high amount of image noise. What I don't like as much on the other hand is the blue tint of the sky on the One RS. However, Insta360's camera also has a dedicated shooting mode, Active HDR, for shots that require high dynamic range. By the way, Active HDR is specifically designed for action shots, in other words for shots with a lot of movement. And actually it works quite well. Active HDR protects highlights similarly well to the Hero 10 while also retaining detail in the darker areas. You can see basically the same thing with this shot in motion. In standard video mode, bright areas burn out fairly quickly, as you can also see here. The Active HDR mode, on the other hand, protects these areas quite well. However, you should know that Active HDR is limited to 30 frames per second. Slow motion shots are therefore not possible. Both cameras still have a flat color profile that is also supposed to improve the dynamic range. You can see the comparison here. The log profile of the Insta360 camera produces slightly brighter and more desaturated images than the flat color profile of the GoPro. Both color profiles protect highlights similarly well. In my opinion, slow motion shots are very important for an action camera. And this is where the Hero 10 shows its particular strength. It allows you to shoot at 4K and 120 frames per second. The One RS is not capable of that. In 4K the shots are limited to 60 frames per second, and as you can see in this comparison, that's a big difference. Plus, even 4K 60 on the One RS results in a crop. To keep up with the 120 frames of the Hero 10, you have to reduce the resolution to 2.7K on the One RS. Here, 100 frames per second are now possible. The lower resolution naturally leads to reduced image quality. You can also see that. Also in this case, the image from Insta360's camera is cropped. The Hero 10 shot looks better. For extreme slow motion, you can shoot in 2.7K and 240 frames per second with the GoPro. On the Insta360, you can shoot in 1080 at 200 frames per second. Even in this case, you can easily see the lower resolution of the One RS. The Hero 10's footage doesn't look extremely good, but it's clearly better than that of the One RS. The sensor of the 4K boost lens of the One RS is slightly larger than that of the Hero 10. And the aperture of 2.4 is also slightly larger than that of the Hero 10. Both of these could lead to advantages in low light. However, the comparison in low light between these two cameras is not easy. Although I fixed the exposure settings manually, the image from the One RS is significantly darker, even though it actually has a larger aperture. It may be that GoPro brightens the image afterwards in camera, but what is already noticeable in the ISO comparison is that while the GoPro produces a brighter image, it also produces significantly more image noise. You'll have to trust my statements here, because it's usually not possible to judge image noise well on YouTube, since the shots of the ISO values can only be compared to a limited extent due to the different brightness. I took a few more shots with the automatic in different lighting conditions. Now the shots are comparably bright. And when I take a closer look at these comparison shots, I have to say that the Insta360's shots have significantly less image noise and look much cleaner overall. Again, the big difference in colors is striking. However, I would clearly prefer the One RS in low light. Besides image quality, good stabilization is probably the most important feature of a good action camera. The One RS now also enables in-camera stabilization. On the predecessor model, the One R, the footage originally had to be stabilized afterwards in the app. For this first shot, I did a cinematic dolly forward, trying to keep the cameras as still as possible. The field of view of both cameras is set to linear, and I can hardly notice any difference here. Both cameras actually stabilize the shot very well. Here you can see a vlogging comparison. As far as stabilization goes, I can't see any difference here either. In the background though, it's noticeable that the sky burns out a bit more in the One RS shot. This confirms what we noticed earlier. For this shot, I attached the camera to the handlebar of a bike. This causes extreme vibrations when riding. However, both cameras handle the situation very well. I can see here that one camera would have better stabilization. I don't know why, but the Insta360 shot looks a bit washed out here. Perhaps it uses a slower shutter speed than the GoPro. Even in this walking test, where unlike earlier, I no longer made sure to keep the camera steady, you can barely tell the difference between the two cameras. Only in this running test would I say that the GoPro stabilization works a bit better. Both shots show a lot of shake. This is also a somewhat extreme test. However, slight advantages for the GoPro can be determined here. For such extreme requirements, there is the improved stabilization boost on the GoPro, but this has a stronger crop. For comparison, I took a shot on the ONE RS with the cropped field of view wide. And actually, the ONE RS can keep up well here too, as you can see in this comparison. You get the best possible stabilization on the GoPro with the field of view linear with horizon leveling. For comparison, the ONE RS features the option horizon lock. However, this is only available when you stabilize the shot in the app. Here, I don't like the Insta360 shot as much, because the stabilization leads to this strong wobbling effect. You can see that well in the background. I also noticed that the ONE RS produces minor jerks from time to time, as in this case here. Still, I'm surprised at how well the stabilization of the ONE RS works. The audio quality of the GoPro has been revised again and again in recent years. The ONE RS has also received new microphones. Here you can hear a direct comparison between the two cameras. Can you hear a clear difference? It is a particular challenge to remove annoying wind noise when biking or skiing. Let's listen to a direct comparison. I was really surprised to hear that the 4K module of the ONE RS has 48 megapixels. More than twice as many as the Hero 10. Can you actually see this difference in the photos? Here you can see a photo of the Hero 10 and here a photo of the Insta360 ONE RS. Even if we zoom in, there is hardly any difference in the details. However, these are the two JPEG files. So I compared the raw file of the ONE RS with the image of the GoPro. And again, I could only see slightly more detail in the ONE RS shot. Personally, I had no problem with either camera in terms of overheating or battery life. But since I know that many of you are interested in this topic, I made a comparison. I did the overheating test in 4K 60 and recorded until the cameras gave up. The ONE RS shut down after about 23 minutes. The Hero 10 after about 34 minutes. The result in 4K 60 is thus clearly in favor of the Hero 10. To test battery life, I shot footage in 4K 30. Both cameras have no problem with overheating when shooting at 4K 30. The Insta360 lasted about 10 minutes longer, in total 1 hour and 24 minutes. In addition, the battery of the ONE RS recharges much faster. As announced at the beginning, I would like to show you a few shots of the other modules of the ONE RS. Only with a 360 module you can take shots like this one. You can reframe the shot afterwards and the selfie stick is automatically removed from the shot. That's cool and really special, although you should know that these shots obviously can't compete with a 4K shot in terms of image quality. You'll also need to edit each 360 shot in the app. The result of the edit is then a shot in 1080. The module with the 1-inch sensor, on the other hand, is intended for those who want the best possible image quality in an action camera. As my comparison test from last year already showed, even the Hero 10 can't keep up with the image quality that this sensor produces. Especially in low light, this module shows its strengths. Okay, what would I recommend? As we've seen today, Insta360's new camera can definitely keep up well in many areas. However, the Hero 10 has a number of advantages as a pure action camera. It has a much larger display, which makes it more comfortable to use. With 4K 120, it can take the better slow motion shots. In addition, the highlights are better protected. The audio quality of the GoPro is also clearly better in my opinion, and the Hero 10 is also a little less bulky, because the ONE RS you will mostly use together with the frame. The ONE RS has advantages in low light, and of course it offers the possibility to connect a 360 module or even the excellent 1-inch module. You can also upgrade these modules at a later time. The colors of the ONE RS also have a strong tint towards magenta. You have to like that. Price-wise, the ONE RS with the 4K boost lens is a bit cheaper than the Hero 10, so if you're primarily looking for a pure action camera and you're not interested in the other modules, I still recommend the Hero 10. It's simply the better choice as a pure action camera. But if you're also interested in 360, then you should definitely take a closer look at the ONE RS. 360 shots are cool and really something special. You'll find links to current offers for both cameras in the video description. And that's it for today. Give me a like as feedback if the video was interesting for you, and see you next time.